Hello, fellow foodies. Welcome back. This is Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you're listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. Today on the show, we're going to be covering one of my favorite topics. This is a personal hobby of mine, and I'm sure of many of the listeners, and that is gardening. Our guest today is Chris McLaughlin. She's the author of 9 books written about her life's passions about nature, gardening, small livestock, and the family farm. She's been gardening for over 40 years and has enjoyed rural living both in the suburbs and on small farms. She became a master gardener in 2000 and acquired specialty certificates in programs such as the Food, Land, and People Project, Kids in Gardens, and Backyard Wildlife Habitats. Chris's work can be found in Fine Gardening Magazine, Hobby Farm, Home Magazine, Urban Farm Magazine, the Heirloom Gardener Magazine, and Mother Earth Living. She also has a fantastic new book that's out this year. It's called The Good Garden: How to Nurture Pollinators, Soil, Native Wildlife, and Healthy Food, all in your own backyard. So great to have you on the show, Chris. And I'm really eager to learn, a bit about you, and also learn about some tips that you may have for us in our own backyard gardens.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so great being here. Yeah, my book, I have this book has been meaning to come out for a very long time, and it's just the book of my heart in the sense that in feeding ourselves in a healthy way and growing our gardens in a healthy way that puts good food into us. All of those good ways of growing are also helping our earth and our soils and our ecosystems. And I happen to have a really big focus on wildlife. It's a big thing for me. So I like to grow food and everything I grow, flowers and everything, in such a way that it makes our lives, healthier and more wonderful. And at the same time, does the same for our ecosystem and our wildlife in our own backyards.
That's great. No, I 100% agree. I think gardens can bring so much, not only just joy and kind of mental health boosts to be in the garden, but also, they bring such a treasure to our plates, and we can taste the difference in flavor. And that, of course, translates into different chemistries of fresh vegetables that come into our diet. You write a lot about these concepts of interconnectedness of various creatures in the garden environment, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that, about how animals and pollinators play into your ideal garden.
Right. Well, one of the things is that I really like to explain to people sometimes is the idea of, not using the pesticides and that kind of, freaks people out a little bit because they think everything will be ugly and ruined and mostly that's not true. Parts of it can be, but you're also supporting the ecosystem in that way. But the other thing is, most people like starting from just the basics of most of us want some wildlife. We're interested in birds and butterflies and everything, right? So when you kill off even the guys that you think are bad, and what's coming to my mind right now is the oak tent caterpillars that fall from our oak trees and they're annoying. That is also when you're killing that off, you're killing off the bird's food. So, you want birds to come to your yard, but you're busy poisoning their food and killing it. So hard to get them to come. And clearly, we need the pollinators and the poisons that we use to kill the things that are eating our plants, or maybe we just don't like them for various reasons. Those things also kill the good animals too. They kill the pollinators, they kill your beneficial insects other than pollinators, which is like your predator insects like say ladybugs or praying mantises and things like that. So it is all interconnected. What you're putting back out there is obviously going to come back to us and also into your soils and into the earth around you. And being part of that ecosystem, they really do help. And as far in terms of we were talking before about ladybugs, and so I really encourage people to get to know what their friendly creatures look like, because there are some creatures that look really creepy, and yet they're some of our greatest assets. And baby ladybugs are one of those. They look like these teeny tiny black and red hideous little alligator creatures. They're so gross. And people are like, what is this? And it's like, oh, that's the good guy. He's coming to the rescue. He eats like like, I forgot if it was like 30 times the amount of aphids that a ladybug eats. He has this voracious appetite. So, getting to know that, there are definitely books out there, and, even from your um, local sources, you'll be able to get downloads and things of people have written things that tell you what these bugs look like, and tell you what to look for that are good and bad, and what have you. So it's really good to get to know that, and also what damage might really be damage. A couple of tomato plant leaves that are eaten a tiny bit. I mean, is that really damage? Is it? I mean, it's not. You got some healthy tomatoes going. You're bringing them in, and you're eating them, and you're all good. Even if you're missing a tomato or two, meh, you know. I mean, come on. So,
Yeah.
our ideas of perfection, our Instagram worthy perfection, are not the idea of perfection that the natural world is going to call perfection. So, wrapping our minds around that is really,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think within like the foraging community, there's this ethos of, take what you need and leave a bit for the critters that also need to use that wild food as their food source. And so maybe I can sacrifice a few tomatoes to,
yeah.
the chipmunks and squirrels who invade
That's
my garden.
Yeah, we actually do, sacrifice. We have some willows, some small willow bushes that we were harvesting for their branches, and, there's butterflies that actually, come from those guys, and so we let one tree get decimated, but the other ones were fine. The
Yeah.
rest are beautiful, and then that one, and we do it with our tomato plants as well, you know,
Mhm.
we do. We let some animals just take it down, and then the rest of it's ours. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's smart.
Yeah.
So I was in the store today looking at, some different plants to get going in my garden. And in the checkout line, I saw they had some little containers of earthworms and ladybugs. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts about that? If we're going for kind of an organic or biodynamic way of home gardening,
Right.
should we be thinking about buying insects to introduce to the environment if we don't see a lot of them? Or how do we know if we actually need them or if they're already there?
Well, with the worms, what I've always noticed is that if you build any kind of compost pile, or even in your garden bed, if you're laying compost down and letting those organic materials, decompose, the red worms kind of come on their own. I mean, they truly do. A lot of people do like to buy not only the ladybugs, which you can release if you feel that you have, a lot of soft-bodied insects like the aphids, but also another predator one would be the praying mantis. They actually sell the little egg sacs. It's really cool. I mean, it's kinda, like, scary, but, like, really cool, right? And you bring them home, and they hatch, and all these tiny little babies come out, and they're, all over your garden, and they're helping you. So, I mean, sure, I think that's a great way to do it, and, of course, getting them locally from local sources would be ideal, because 'cause you're really looking for that sort of, thing. That's why we always talk about putting as many native plants into um, your space as much as you can. Clearly, it'd be pretty difficult to actually only have native plants. If you were a wilderness dude living up in the mountains and you had only native plants, that could work. But if you're growing a garden, you'd be hard pressed to actually find a vegetable or even fruit in there really that is native to your area. So that's going to be, that's tricky. You're going to have some non-natives, but the idea is to plant things that are non-invasive, which is that they don't take over our native plants, but also that they're calling in your native pollinators, because that's the key, is what's out there pollinating naturally. You want to call in. So as many, native plants you can get out there, you're going to call those good guys in. But I don't mind, buying some too. Absolutely. If I want a little boost.
That's great. Okay. This, 'cause I was like, I was considering buying this, like, I'm gonna wait and speak to the expert today and see what she thinks.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
like so I have another insect question, and this may be one that some of our listeners contend with. Every year, I enter a fierce battle with slugs. They, love to chomp up my cabbages and my lettuce, and I'm wondering, I've
Right.
I've tried every natural thing, eggshells, what's your advice for dealing with those? Or is there a
Well,
good natural way to deal with slugs or maybe another insect
uh,
predator?
Yeah, the one thing I've tried, which I don't know if you've tried it or not, but is I put a giant flat board down and let it be moist underneath. You can moisten the soil or whatever. And overnight I lay that down. The snails usually gather underneath that at night. And if you go out there in the early morning and lift that board up, all the snails are clinging to it. And then I just kind of brush them off into the garbage can or
Well, that's
whatever.
easy enough. Okay.
Yeah, that works out really well. There's also a product if that's not working and they're really invading, like not just taking a little bit. Remember, ecosystem, right? Well, but at the same time, if they are taking a lot, then you can use Sluggo, and Sluggo is iron phosphate, which actually doesn't hurt any other creatures. What it does for the slug is it stops it from eating. So they'll be out there. It's not a quick thing. This is not a giant spray it out there and everyone's laying there dead. It's not like that. It takes a little bit of time because you're stopping their appetite. But I really find between doing that board, if you did that like every day, honestly, in that area, you're going to really knock that count down. And also, your birds are going to come take a bunch of things too. So, of course, encouraging all of that to work together. And the thing is, too, like we live in an Amazon Prime world, right? I mean, right? So everything has to be like this. I mean, that's what we're used to. I mean, even since the microwave, right? I mean, honestly, I have literally stood in front of my microwave, no lie, 90 seconds left and I'm doing this. Come on.
Why
90
stay so long? Yeah.
seconds, and I can't wait, right? So that mentality of it is true in a natural garden when you're really trying to do things in a way that works with nature. It takes a little bit of time. You have to give
Mhm.
things time to work. So the slow food movement, the slow fashion movement, the slow flower movement, the slow garden movement.
Yeah.
Slow down, it's okay, give it a break. So
Yeah.
that's really important because people think things don't work right away and they don't see that massive result and then that isn't instantly gratifying. So, but what we do find is if you keep using a lot of these, more natural ways, you're going to find the garden comes in balance.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the goal overall. When I think about how I lay out my garden, I'm also always looking for ways to grow plants in harmony. And one of those ways is by looking for plant companions. And,
Yeah.
how do I plant one type of vegetable with another? For example, I'm getting ready to plant some peas on a trellis, and along the line, I'm putting in some lettuce, and the peas, have nitrogen fixating bacteria that will help the
Right.
lettuce grow. And so they make nice companions. And I'm wondering, in your experience, um, maybe we'll just start with like a vegetable garden. Do you have any tips on how to really find the best plant friends for each other?
Yeah. I don't do a lot of, that's a tough one because there's so many different
There's
ways that
so many different iterations. Yeah.
but one of them, like you're saying, of course, there's some that go hand in hand or whatever. But one thing I want to talk about because you brought up the uh, the nitrogen, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So, so with the peas and the legumes, they fix nitrogen in their roots, right? Well, lots of times what we'll do is a little cover crop in a bed, and we'll grow it in the fall or in the early spring, and we'll let those legumes grow. And by the way, it isn't just legumes, but I like that because it fixes the nitrogen. So anyway, and as it grows, when it starts to get that bloom, and just before it blooms, we knock it down into the soil and let it stay there and it lets go of that nitrogen. And so I find that like a way of companion planting that I really, think works, really well in terms of, it's not right next to each other, exactly, but it's something a little different, but
It's
it's
part of
something.
the cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I like to rotate my plant families. And that's another way of trying to keep pests and disease away is if you're doing things with peppers and tomatoes and those are nightshade family. The pests and the disease are gonna when they discover that bed and they start hanging out, you really would like them to move on for the next season. So you might
Mhm.
plant those in a whole different area and put something different in this one. So I talk about bed rotation in there because that's really a great way to dodge things. And so that's not exactly companion planting, but it's sort of
It's a strategy.
it's a
Yeah.
strategy, a plant strategy, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those weirdos that I shouldn't say weirdo, I think it's fun, but, like, I have every bed labeled by plant family and scientific name of each species I have
Yeah.
growing, and I have little labels.
Oh, I
My
love it.
husband says, "Well, who's gonna read this?" It's like, "I read it, and I enjoy it."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I always have those fantasies that I go around and it's like I did this the other day with my oak trees. In California,
Mhm.
we have, like, I
Yeah.
don't know how many we have, 23 or something, different types of oak trees. We don't have that many on my property, but we have quite a few. And I'm
Mhm.
going around, like, going tying these things, going hanging it. My husband's like, "Why?" I'm like, "What if someone comes here and they say, 'That's a beautiful oak tree. I want one just like it.' I want them to know what it is."
I love it. Yes,
I
yes.
love information,
Get
property,
your plant labels out. Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, I may use that as an excuse to start labeling the plants in my front
Right?
yard.
I'm sure someone wants to know. It could
Yeah,
happen? So,
that's amazing.
yeah, I love that stuff, yeah. I'm a nerd for that.
Well well, I wanna dive a little bit deeper into your book, and yeah, maybe you could just share with us a little bit about it because the whole premise of the book is really about um, how to really help your backyard garden thrive, um, and, how to nurture all these different units from the pollinators to, wildlife. Um, Maybe you could just share with us a little bit of the structure of the book and what readers might expect when they dig in.
Sure. Basically, I call it a gateway book. I always call myself a gateway drug because that's kind of, I like to introduce people to all these concepts that they may not have known about before. Um, And just introducing them, usually people will think to themselves, "Ooh, that sounds like that's right up my alley. I dig that." And I want people to have, instead of writing like a book that focused on one type, I wanted people to see all these different ways that they might incorporate, these practices. And these practices are borrowed from all kinds of different types of, what we might quantify as a specific gardening technique. These are all borrowed. And I want to show people all the different ways that they can make a difference. And maybe they're just starting. And if they want to make, they can take one or two things and incorporate it. And then always they end up wanting to do more because it works and it's wonderful and they're really happy about it. And the other thing I want to talk about too is that, I'm on a farm at this point, but I have done everything here on my farm. I have done that in the suburbs, every single thing, including I snuck 2 potbelly pigs over there. I also had 3 hens, and I had a front yard garden. So, you know,
I
but
have a potbelly pig as well. I really wanna get chickens, but,
oh,
the yard's
I love
getting
the
crowded.
potbelly pigs. They are the best. They are the best.
I love it.
They really are so much. And yeah, and I mean, we were allowed in that area. We were allowed to have chickens, and probably maybe not so much the pigs, but the chickens we were, as long as they weren't roosters. So I did all of the things that I'm doing here with gardening and composting and all of the things. I did that in a suburban zone, and I did all of these good things. So I want to share with people that you can do, all of these healthy things. You don't have to be somewhere big. You don't have to try to make a difference. Like, well, I don't have really big space. It's small. It does make a difference. And especially when your neighbors catch on and they start to see what you're doing and that it's working and they start to inquire. And so I like to encourage people to. I talk a little bit, towards the back of the book about community and how to get that community involved with what you're doing. Um, a lot of people, especially nowadays, it seems like they don't know their neighbors that well. And they get very nervous that if they show they have something, that someone's going to get angry. And of course, there are people that might do that. I had one neighbor that I had a compost pile. And of course, I compost differently here. Here, I just have big mounds and I do not care because I'm on a farm. But there, I did a nice little fencing around it. I had plants growing up and flowers blooming, like just trying to be really respectable. And this was in my backyard, but I still felt like when they look over their back fence, I just wanted it to be looking, aesthetic a bit. So she had a bunch of flies. And she said to me, I think your compost pile is bringing in flies. Like, I think it probably smells and whatever. And I'm like, you think so? Come over. So she came over because I wouldn't want that either, of course. And so she came over and I put my hand in the pile and I showed it to her and I said, well, smell it. Does it smell? And she's like, no, No, it just smells like really nice soil. I'm like, "All right." And there was no flies on it either. I mean, there was no net. And she was like, "Oh, I guess it's not coming from here." And I'm like, "No." And then, then it becomes a bigger conversation where maybe she could do that too for her garden. Whereas before it looked kind of like, "Oh, that might bring something." But when you share and show people what's going on, often you don't get the response you think you'll get. And, even like out front, a lot of people are expanding out front. They may put a couple of small fruit trees or they may put an actual vegetable garden. And I always try and tell people, and even in the book, I try and express be respectful. Don't, you wanted to grow these adorable little jack o' lantern, jack be little pumpkins, right? Growing along your thing, that's wonderful. But don't let it encroach on someone's property, no matter how cool you think that is. That wasn't their decision. So keep it respectful, keep it neat, keep it organized, make it lovely. And most people don't complain. And actually, they will ask you, how are you doing that? What's going on here? Or can I have some? you know, Whatever. So, and that's how you get people on board is really with having respect and not, you know, um, pushing things onto people, but more inviting them in. So I do a lot of talking about that in the back of the book, but all the way through, I like to give you ideas on what you can do for, keeping weeds away, organically and naturally, pests. I talk about if you want to do a specific garden, say you want to put a butterfly garden out there, and I talk about how not only do you need things for the nectar and the pollen, but you also need the plants that that particular butterfly is going to lay its eggs on, and that little caterpillar will indeed eat all the way to the ground because that's what's going to give you more of those beautiful butterflies. So, we talk a little bit about the monarchs in there, and we go all the way into citizen science, which, if you like nature, takes you a little deeper, where you can become part of science as just an average citizen. It's all up at a collective database, and there's so many different ways to get involved with that. So, yeah, I talk about, just all. It's kind of runs the gamut of everything in there. So, truly a gateway.
No, I love that. I love that. I think you're really onto something too about talking with our neighbors about plants and native plants and you
Yeah.
know, um I'll give you some examples. Like in our neighborhood, I'm really fortunate because I have some neighbors that are really into gardening, really into native plants, and so we kind of have that similar mindset. And then there are others that have beautiful fig trees, for example, and I love to make a fig leaf liqueur. And so I'm
Yeah.
always thinking, could I just grab some leaves? I'm like, I don't want to be a fig leaf, thief here. So I like I knock and I explain to them how I like to use the fig because they have it just as an ornamental. I'm like, oh, this actually, you can also do cool things to make these really interesting beverages out of the leaves. It's not just the fruits. And so I think you're absolutely right. You can really open up amazing conversations with people, you know, and find common ground, but
Yeah.
also being respectful so your plants are just growing
Oh,
into everybody else's
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even in that area, I did grow some, native grasses that would grow kind
Mhm.
of tall, right? And they would, produce the seed heads for the birds. But I did not do that out front.
Mhm.
I mean, remember your neighbors are paid, it's fair to say that they've paid good money for their homes. They want their neighborhood to look nice. Absolutely. So that kind of thing I had in a little cornered fenced area. It actually looked like it was some sort of garden situation as opposed to, oh, I just forgot to mow or so. It wasn't like
Yeah.
that. So it gave a little purpose. And so the other thing is too with your neighbors, like you were talking about, the neat thing is that if you're maybe growing something and you have a vegetable garden and they have fig leaves, or perhaps they have some dwarf
Mhm.
fruit trees or something, you guys can trade. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what it's like to homestead. Like, honestly, people swear to you have collectives in their neighborhood where they are all trading fruits and flowers and things like that. That's literally modern homesteading.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as being, I mean, it is. It's just in a current lifestyle, but honestly, when you're sharing what you're producing, you're being like, any farmer that's out there raising cattle, and he might give meat to someone who's out there that is growing corn, and that's all that
Mhm.
guy's really growing, and someone else is doing veggies and they're collaborating. You can do that without the cattle. You can do that, in your neighborhood, you can come up with stuff and you can go to community areas and pick up, compost and things like that. A lot of, I know our fairgrounds will do that. They have big piles
Mhm.
of compost and they'll let the community know, bring your trucks, load them up. So, I mean, really, as a community, you can do so much to keep this, the ecosystem, thriving in your area, and you get to see and know things you never knew existed before or why they existed. So anyway, so that's why
Yeah.
I wrote it, and that, yeah,
I love that. I mean, the more that I learn about health as a system, as an ecosystem, really,
yeah,
our health is not just contingent upon the foods we eat and the medicines we take or our genetics. It also has to do with our social networks, with our, mental well-being, our sense of place, our sense of meaning within communities, within spaces. And I think
right.
all that you just described is not just, great for maximizing resources within a community, but it's also about maximizing your health. And I just love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, what could be healthier? I mean,
Yeah.
and even I mean, healthier physically for sure, and
Mhm.
also healthier mentally, which what we're having these relationships with people. I mean, there's people in your neighborhood that honestly they do live alone. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean they don't have extended family. It's not to say that, but they are living in their house alone. And how wonderful would that be if once a month or something, well, wherever you figured it out, people got together and exchanged something, or, oh, look, my tomatoes are ripe. I'm going to go give some to this person. And,
Yeah.
honestly, that is takes you a long way as far as longevity, in
Mhm.
lifespan. I mean, seriously, people need people. And
Absolutely.
it's how it is. We can't get away from it. And I watched people talking about one time, they were saying how, with the internet and with our phones and with that we're getting away from, in some ways, I agree in some ways. But here's the thing, the most popular websites on the web are sites where we're in these forums together. We're listening to
Yeah, that's
podcasts
true.
together. What? So let's see what's happening here. We developed technology so we could reach people. That's correct.
Mhm.
I mean, in
Yeah.
some ways, that lone person at home may have more friends than they've ever had because they connect in this little box on Earth. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
keep reaching out for people, even though the technology keeps coming at us, and we go, oh, we're still reaching out. We still need people. We still want people. So I just, that's why it's a big
Absolutely.
thing for me with the community section in there. I just think that we could be doing a lot more for
That's
each other
amazing.
in the world. So yeah,
No, I'm 100% on that. I think connectivity to people. And then, another big component for me is just connectivity to earth and to nature. And there's something beautiful about planting a seed and watching it grow. And I know that sounds like a Hallmark card, right? But really, I
it's
can't
true.
explain, my there are these memes on the internet that say, how do you like my $50 cucumber, because all the things that you go to like growing it. But I'm like, you know what?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
cucumber comes with more than just,
yeah,
the actual nutritional value of it. It comes with all the steps and the joy it brings me in creating it. And I think, of course, there are easier ways to grow things. They don't have to be so
right,
expensive.
right,
Um, but, I think one thing that many people lack is really the skills. And I when I say people, I'm including myself, even though my expertise is in botany, it's more on the side of understanding how to identify plants in the wild and how to understand their chemistry. I've
right,
never taken a horticulture class, for
right,
example. And
right.
so there have been many, many seasons of trial and error where everything dies or sometimes it thrives. And so I'm kind of learning my way forward, but I know there are resources available. And so I wonder if you could tell us about that. Like, how can we, and this is really US centric, but
Right,
there are government resources. What can you tell us about where we can go in our
right.
state to learn how to grow, native plants and have successful gardens?
Well, one of the best places I find is the Master Gardening Program, which I did way back in 2000. I think I said to you earlier, 2010, which made me laugh at that. Oh, no, no. Yeah, it was 10 years earlier before that. I'm old. Um, but anyway, they through your cooperative extension office in your state, not only do they have courses if you wanted to do that, but even if you didn't, they always have people at the ready to answer your local questions, which is right super important. I mean, you could get all the books you want, you can look things up, but boy, when they're right in your backyard and you're like, well, I have this plant doing this thing, they're like, aha, we know what's happening because it's happening all over. And so they help you with that. So reaching out to the master gardeners is like a really great resource. And then also, if you wanted to become one, that's really awesome. That information trickles down from the universities and they train people to be master gardeners in the county. They also host plant sales, one of which I just missed the other day. And they do heirloom vegetables and things like that, but they also have the native plant sale. So they make sure people get those in their yards as well. So I always say reach out locally because that's really what I'm all about. Obviously, the locality of anything extends to the entire world, right? But I think that we don't focus often on what we can do in our small as our small cells in our small yards. And so reaching out locally is your best way to be knowledgeable about what you're doing. And I love the botany thing you brought up. Like, honestly, that's the degree I would want. I'm a botany geek. Like, I don't know nearly enough, but everything I learn, it's so amazing to me. And you talk about, the seed growing, and people are like, oh, we have miracles around us every day. We just don't think they're miracles because they happen all the time. And so we miss it. But I am always amazed how an apple seed, which by the way, you probably wouldn't want to grow apples from an apple seed, but if you did, and it grew into a tree, right? And all of the people it feeds for how many years? Those things live a long time. And I think to myself, is that not a miracle that that tiny seed holds every single thing it needs to do all that for everybody for years and years and years on end? I mean, it's miraculous to me. That's why I do love botany because that's
Oh,
all very miraculous to me. That's just,
yeah.
so yeah, I love that stuff. So
No, it
anyway,
is incredible. I mean, I know some people love I mean, I do enjoy the fall and the summer, but I would say spring is my favorite season of all because it's that period of growth and you get to see your little babies grow. I start all of my seeds indoors so I
yeah,
can really get the garden going as soon as we pass the risk of frost. And yeah, it's just an incredible thing. So for all the listeners out there, if you don't have access to land, there's a lot you can do with simple containers on a windowsill. I've spoken before about mints, and there are lots of great medicinal mints that are good in food or good as tea ingredients. You can start at home just in your windowsill. And for those of you that do have access to land, really take a look, take a survey. See, like, how many of those plants in your yard are actually native,
yeah,
number 1. Can you increase that ratio? And can you grow a little bit of extra food for yourself? I mean, I'm also a big lover of fruit trees because 'cause they're so easy, right? You just stick
yeah.
they take time,
It
so
takes
I've
time.
got
Yeah, that's the
it
part
takes
everyone
time.
gets worried about.
Yeah.
Let's take
You're
a
not gonna get, like, this amazing apple harvest the year that you
right,
plant
right.
it. It can take a few years, but man, when they do come in, it's such a great and, a well-earned investment that you've waited on
I
investment and
agree, and
time.
it goes on for a lot, I mean,
Mhm.
that tree just produces more and more and more every single year. In fact, our native, western red buds, they've just
Mm.
they still have some flowers on them now, but they're all starting to leaf out now. But, I make western red bud jelly.
Oh,
Yeah,
yum.
and it's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's wonderful. It's so delicious, and it literally tastes like spring. There's no way to describe it. It's so light and so floral, and it's
Mhm.
wonderful. And going out there and harvesting some of those flower petals, which is what I'm after. Uh,
Mhm.
I only take, little handfuls. We have quite a few of them on our property. I take little handfuls from each tree, not a whole lot. I don't, decimate anything. But at the same time, it's so awesome. Just like, yeah, native plants from our yard, and here's our jelly, and it's
That's amazing.
awesome.
I love we have the Eastern redbud here. I use it to make cocktails, though.
Ah, this is
I like
good.
a bourbon cocktail with those beautiful redbuds on top. So
Wonderful.
good, so
Oh,
tasty.
that's wonderful. That's so
Yeah.
great. I love there could be like this little yeah, this little book on, putting like the what you could do with these native plants that you have, these different things,
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention all the other things you grow, the different ways that you
Mhm.
can put them into things. Like, as you know, for your health and everything, the different ways to utilize is amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, plants are like, we should be bowing down to plants. They're why we're here, guys.
Yeah.
That's
I agree. I am definitely someone that loves on the plants, hugs all the trees that
yeah,
the old trees especially.
I do too.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It was funny at our other house, there was a 500-year-old oak that came
Wow.
and it came down.
Oh, no.
And it was on someone else's property, but in the other house that I lived at on a farm,
Mhm.
it was on someone else's farm. And it came down, and I am telling you, I know we are the biggest geeks, but you know what? We had a ceremony for that tree. And, like, honestly, and people were taking the acorns that had fallen so they could grow from that tree the exact
Wow.
we had a ceremony, and it was like but it was, like, important because it's like a 500-year-old tree, this country wasn't discovered.
Yeah.
That tree was growing before what? Before everything here. So, like, it was
Amazing.
amazing. It was just this grand old thing, and it was really neat to see the little things people brought to lay on the tree and everything, and
Oh.
it was super cool, but it's respect. I mean,
Mhm.
honestly, it all comes down to respect for, what the earth gives us, honestly. That's really what it
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely, especially in a time where we've lost so many of our very old trees. I mean,
Yeah.
globally, just
Yeah.
because of human
Absolutely.
expansion, development, and etcetera. It's
Yeah. Yes,
yeah.
to acknowledge and respect it, I think that that also shows, people who might have thought, "What are these people doing by that tree over there?" You know, they might have like and then they find out what we were doing, and then they're thinking, "Oh, that's so silly," and then they're thinking, "Well, yeah, well, it's silly, but I get it," and you know what I mean? And then any children who are watching, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
anything you're doing, those kids are watching.
Yeah.
So that's the way that's what I love about the citizen science too, getting them involved with, oh my gosh, there's so many things. We do the Bluebird Project here because we have like a bazillion bluebirds. So we do the egg count and the nestling count. We see how many hatch and everything. It's really great. And we upload that. We do a phenology group where we watch the changes in our native plants that are happening. But there's so many. There's even this in the stars, the galaxies you're looking at night and you're doing different things with that. And there's one where you go down with they're the horseshoe, what am I thinking? Horseshoe crabs, and I think
Mm,
they feed
mhm.
themselves or something. I'm not positive that. And you go down there and you throw them all back in.
Get them back in the water.
They're in
Oh, there's
the water. It's like
yeah.
there's frog sounds ones, like where you're listening to frogs and writing down what you're hearing and stuff. I mean, God, get your kids involved with this stuff because that's what teaches them that respect and that love for our natural world, which we are a part of 100%. We are also very natural. And seeing that be connected, with the kids seeing that connection, they're the ones that will do better later because,
Yeah.
we are showing them that respect. So
Oh,
I
I
really,
love it. I love it, and,
yeah,
for the listeners out there, there are so many citizen science initiatives in every state across the
yeah,
country. I mean, globally as well, there's lots of different ways you can get involved. So,
yeah, very much.
amazing advice, amazing discussion today, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on this show. This was a
Thank
lot
you
of
for
fun.
having me. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, you've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious, recorded for you today on Restream. I want to send a big shout out of thanks to our producers, to Rob Cohen and Christine Roth of Co-Conspiracy Entertainment. If you'd like to support the show, we have some amazing, really fun goodies for you to check out. You can head over to Mystery Control to find t-shirts, mugs, and totes that have our show's logo, and that's a great way to support the show. Thanks so much for listening. I want you to stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time.